Got dreams of being a professional podcaster, but have no idea what you're doing?
This is impossible.
That's about to change.
A new kind of school.
Welcome to the Pod School Podcast.
Hello, welcome to the show. Today's question is from April, and it is, how do I reserve a name for my podcast if I want to make sure it doesn't get taken before I get my butt into gear? Is it like registering a business name? Nope. That's the short answer. There is no such thing as reserving a podcast name. You might notice if you research a podcast before you get started that there are already a few podcasts out there with that name. There is nothing stopping that from happening. You can't reserve it like you would a domain or a business name or a trademark. You can trademark the name of something if it is worth it to you. If you have a business and there are financial implications for another person doing a show that has the exact same name, especially if it was the same kind of content and that kind of competition would be detrimental to your business and there would be financial loss, then you can start to think about, okay, this might make sense to trademark. But I've seen very few instances, except when a podcast is specifically related to a very specific business, where it makes sense to trademark a name. And for the most part, there are just multiple shows out there with multiple names. That does not mean if you research your show and you see another show with the same name that you should just go, oh, well, I'll just do it too. Because you have to think about all of the SEO and the kind of search juice that show has built up that you are now competing with, particularly if that existing show or shows are releasing episodes. It is going to be very hard for you to compete with a show that already exists, that's been pumping out episodes. When people are searching for your show, they're going to find the other shows before they find your show. So it's really best to adjust your name if there are already shows out there with it. A lot of people don't do that, but a lot of people don't do research, to be honest. A lot of people just launch a show and then go, oh, there's another show out there that's named the same as mine. And they haven't even looked before they launched it because they like the name so much. So it's really important to do the research before you jump in. Ideally, change your idea slightly if you need to, if you have competitors out there, particularly if it's in the same kind of content category. Ideally, you do not want to copy an idea that already exists. If you see a show and you're like, it's already out there, you don't want to make a carbon copy of that. Really, if there are other shows in your niche that are kind of similar topic areas, that's totally fine. You do your version of that show, but it needs to be unique. It needs to be different. But I would research the name. I would change it slightly if there is a show out there already. That, can I say, can feel like a very emotional moment, especially if you've been thinking about this idea and you haven't really done any research, but you've just had the idea for a long time and it's always felt like it should be called that, and that's what you've told everybody, and that's what feels right in your gut, and then all of a sudden you're like, somebody else has already done it? What? This was not a part of my dream. That can be really difficult to get through, but I promise you, you can get to a better name. I have had multiple times over the course of my career. At this point in time, I'm racking up almost 60 shows that I've worked on the development of. So that is a lot of names to come up with. And sometimes you will settle on a name and you're like, this is perfect. And then you will see there's another show out there like that. And often it's because that name is perfect because a lot of other people have thought about it already. And it is a real bummer because you're like, gosh, that was so the perfect name for this show. But every time we found a better name, every single time. And then that show just becomes that new name. So even though it can feel like the death of a family member, you really can get to a point where that show becomes something else and you are proud of telling people about that. And then next thing you know, once you've released a bunch of episodes, you're like, of course, was it always called this? I feel like I always wanted to call it this. So you will actually get over it, I promise. It will get easier to deal with. If your show exists and you've changed your name and now you've got a name and you're like, great, this is fantastic, I would then definitely try and go and find the URL for that, and I would try and reserve that URL. You do not need an independent website for your show if you already have an existing website. For a lot of my shows, I've just redirected the website to a page on my existing website. You can create a website with your podcast host. A lot of podcast hosts now offer podcast websites as well. Some of them look really good if you like the design of it. That's a great way to kind of have a good page for your website. And often those are built in a way that features the audio that it might be too hard for you to actually, depending on what theme you have, make a page that works as well. So that can kind of be a good option. So I would reserve the URL, and sometimes if you can't get the URL for that, you can just get the version of it that has podcast at the end. So for this show, PodSchool is my online podcasting course. So I already have the PodSchool domain and the PodSchool podcast version of that is the domain that I have for the podcast. So I've just added podcast on the end of that. So those are the steps that I would go through. Research your idea, see if there are other shows out there, change your name or tweak it slightly if there are shows out there, because you just don't want to be competing with anybody. You want to make sure that you have as kind of clear a space to build your audience as possible. Grab the URL for that, because that is the thing that somebody can't take from you. So they can take your podcast name, but they can't grab the URL. And then just try and embrace a new name if you had to change it. I promise it does get easier. We can get so attached to these creative ideas that we come up with, and it can feel like this is the only way that something can exist. But there really is always a better idea. If you can't do a certain idea, there's a reason for it, and that just has to be something that you accept and you move on. So, yes, you can't reserve a show name, which is a bit of a bummer, especially if you are taking a bit of time to get yourself together and get things out in the world, because the reality is someone might jump in there before you get there. But if you can get the URL, then grab the URL. And then if you can't get the podcast name at the time, well, then you can rethink that. But at least you've got the URL and you can get rid of it if you don't need it. But that is the thing that you can't get two of, unless, of course, you do the .uk or the .fm or the .whatever. But if you want the .com or whatever that is specific to your area, then you will need to get that. So that's something that if you have the idea, I would probably try and nail down if you can. If you would like to submit a question, I would love to answer it. And all you have to do is go to the description of the episode, click the link, and put your little question in there. And then I will talk into a microphone and tell you my thoughts about it. If you want a bit of help with your podcast, please head to podschool.com.au, my online podcasting course. I've got all the information there about what is included in the course. And if you're thinking, I really just want to get this up and rolling and I am sick of Googling and ChatGPT has run out of ideas, then just come under my wing and I'll help you out and put everything in one place so you can just learn it step by step, get it done, and get it out into the world. All right, I will see you next week.
That's all for today.